The old theater stood silent in the fading Welsh twilight, its weathered brick facade holding decades of stories within its walls. Sir Anthony Hopkins sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, studying the building where his life's purpose first took root 68 years ago. The marquee letters were faded now, some missing entirely, yet the magic still lingered in the evening air. Through the grimy windows, a single ghost light burned on the empty stage, a tradition as old as theater itself, but something else caught his eye. Movement in the shadows, a figure slowly sweeping the stage just as old Richard Blackwood used to do all those years ago. What Anthony would discover behind those doors would shake him to his core and force him to confront the true cost of dreams left behind. Before we continue, where are you watching from? And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed for tomorrow's special update. The evening shadows stretched across Port Talbot, like long fingers reaching into the past. Anthony Hopkins stepped out of his car, his footsteps echoing against the worn cobblestones of Victoria Road. At 75, he moved with the measured grace of a man who had spent a lifetime commanding stages and screens. But here, in the shadow of the Port Talbot Community Theatre, he felt every bit the uncertain 16-year-old boy who had first crossed this threshold in 1955. The building's facade had aged, much like himself, with dignity rather than decay. The red bricks had darkened with time, and ivy crept up the eastern wall like nature's own curtain. The marquee, once bright with promise, now hung slightly askew, missing several letters, but still proudly proclaiming Port Talbot Com Unity the Tray in faded gold lettering. "Sir Anthony?" a voice called from behind him. "I thought it might be you." He turned to find a woman in her early 70s, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a cardigan despite the warm Welsh evening. There was something familiar about her eyes, a shade of green he'd seen before. "Eleanor Blackwood," she said, extending her hand. "Though you might remember me as little Ellie, Richard Blackwood's daughter. I used to watch you rehearse from the lighting booth." Recognition dawned on Anthony's face. "Good Lord, little Ellie. You couldn't have been more than 8 years old then." 7, actually," she smiled, producing a ring of keys from her pocket. "I run the place now, have done for the past 30 years. Would you like to come inside? The ghost light's still burning." Anthony felt his throat tighten. Richard Blackwood had been more than just his first acting teacher. He had been the first person to see past the stuttering, insecure teenager and recognize something more. "Your father," he began. "He was a remarkable man," Ellie finished, unlocking the heavy wooden doors. "He never stopped talking about you, you know. Even after all your success, he'd still say, that boy didn't need teaching. He just needed someone to show him the door." The lobby smelled exactly as Anthony remembered, a mixture of aged wood, dust, and that indefinable scent of creativity that seemed to permeate all theaters. Old playbills lined the walls, yellowed with age but protected behind glass. His eyes caught one from 1955. "The corn is green," with his name in small print near the bottom of the cast list. "We've kept everything," Ellie said, following his gaze. "Every program, every review. Dad insisted. He said theater isn't just about the present. It's about maintaining a connection to every performance that came before." They moved through the lobby toward the auditorium doors. Anthony's hand brushed against the worn brass handle, and memories flooded back. The nervous energy before his first entrance, the surge of confidence after his first laugh from the audience, the moment he realized that on stage, his stutter disappeared completely. The auditorium itself was smaller than he remembered, but somehow more magnificent. The red velvet seats, though faded, still stood in neat rows. The wooden stage, worn smooth by countless performances, gleamed dully under the ghost light's solitary beam. "We still have acting classes here," Ellie said, leading him down the center aisle. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, the Spotlight Squad, we call them now. Kids from all over Port Talbot. Some of them remind me so much of you." As they reached the stage, Anthony noticed the signs of wear that hadn't been visible from the entrance. Water stains on the ceiling, patches where the carpet had worn through, a slight sag in the stage right floorboards. It's not easy keeping it all going, Ellie admitted, reading his expression. The council's cut our funding 3 times in the past decade. We survive on ticket sales and donations, but... She trailed off, her eyes fixed on the ghost light. But, Anthony prompted, gently, James Rothschild. You wouldn't know him, he's new money from Cardiff. He's been buying up properties all along Victoria Road. He's got plans for a modern shopping complex, the theater. She swallowed hard. We're the last holdout. Anthony climbed the familiar steps to the stage, his shoes making the old wood creak in recognition. He walked to center stage where the ghost light cast his shadow long across the boards. This spot, he said softly. Right here. This is where Richard stood when he first heard me read Shakespeare. I was terrible, absolutely dreadful. But, he just smiled and said, again, Anthony, read it again, but this time believe what you're saying. A noise from the back of the theater drew their attention. A group of teenagers had entered quietly, led by a young girl in a wheelchair. Ah, Ellie brightened. Speaking of our current generation, these are some of our Spotlight Squad members. They're preparing for next week's showcase. The teenagers approached, their initial hesitation giving way to curiosity. The girl in the wheelchair moved forward first, her dark eyes bright with recognition. You're really him, aren't you? She asked. Sir Anthony Hopkins. We just watched The Silence of the Lambs in our film study group. Well, those of us whose parents allowed it, she added with a grin. Lily Chen, Ellie introduced her, our most promising dramatic actress. And behind her, that's Noah Foster, Maya Richardson, Aidan O'Connor, and Sophie Winters. Each young face held that same mixture of uncertainty and determination that Anthony remembered seeing in the mirror all those years ago. These were theater kids, dreamers who had found their sanctuary on these wooden boards, just as he had. Would you... Lily hesitated, then pressed on. Would you watch us rehearse? Just for a few minutes? We're doing The Importance of Being Earnest. Anthony glanced at Ellie, who nodded encouragingly. I'd be honored, he said, moving to take a seat in the front row. As the teenagers took their positions on stage, Anthony noticed more details about the theater's condition. The curtains' frayed edges, the scuffed floor, the slight flutter of loose wallpaper near the exit sign. But he also saw something else. The same magic that had captured his heart 6 decades ago was still very much alive in this space. The young actors began their scene, and despite their occasional stumbles, there was raw talent there, particularly in Lily's portrayal of Lady Bracknell. Her wheelchair became invisible as her presence filled the stage, her timing impeccable, her delivery natural and confident. She reminds me of you, Ellie whispered, sitting beside him. The way she transforms on stage. Her mother works 3 jobs to keep her in classes here. Says it's the only place Lily truly forgets about her limitations. Anthony watched as Noah Foster, playing Jack Worthing, delivered his lines with growing confidence. The boy's Welsh accent, which he was trying admirably to suppress for the role, reminded Anthony of his own early struggles. Your father, Anthony said quietly to Ellie. He used to say that theater wasn't just about entertaining people. He said it was about giving them a place to become who they were meant to be. He did, Ellie agreed. And for 68 years, that's what this place has done. But now... She trailed off, watching the young actors with a mixture of pride and concern. The rehearsal continued, but Anthony's mind was already racing ahead. He had come to Port Talbot for a simple nostalgic visit, a brief stop while in Wales for a film project. But sitting here watching these young performers on the same stage where he had discovered his calling, he felt something stirring, a responsibility perhaps, or an opportunity. As the scene concluded, the teenagers looked expectantly at their distinguished audience member. Anthony stood applauding with genuine appreciation. Remarkable, he said, and meant it. Simply remarkable. Though, if I might make one suggestion, he paused, looking at Ellie. Would you mind if I... She gestured toward the stage. It's your home too, Sir Anthony. He climbed back onto the stage, joining the young actors who now watched him with a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation. The ghost light cast long shadows as he began to share the lessons he had learned on these very boards decades ago. None of them noticed the well-dressed man who had slipped into the back of the theater, watching the scene unfold with calculating eyes. James Rothschild took out his phone and made a quick note before quietly leaving. The next phase of his development project couldn't wait much longer, regardless of who might be taking an interest in this old building. The impromptu masterclass continued as the evening deepened. Anthony found himself sharing not just acting techniques but the deeper truths he'd learned in this very space. Acting, he told them, demonstrating with a simple gesture, isn't about pretending. It's about finding the truth in every moment. Even here, in Oscar Wilde's comedy, there's truth beneath the wit. Lily leaned forward in her wheelchair, absorbing every word. But how do you know when you've found it? The truth, I mean. Anthony smiled, remembering asking Richard Blackwood the same question decades ago. You feel it. Right here. He touched his chest. The audience might not know exactly what's changed, but they'll feel it too. As he spoke, more people had quietly entered the theater. Victoria Torrey Pembroke, now in her 80s but still elegant in her tailored blazer, had been passing by when she saw the lights. She stood in the back, watching with knowing eyes. She had played opposite Anthony in that first production of The Corn is Green, and the years seemed to melt away as she watched him command the stage once more. Anthony Hopkins, she called out, her voice still carrying the theatrical training of her youth. Still holding court on our little stage, I see. He turned, recognition and delight spreading across his face. Tori? Good heavens, is everyone from my past hiding in the wings tonight? She made her way down the aisle, each step deliberate but dignified. Only the ones who never left. Some of us knew this place was too precious to abandon. The subtle rebuke in her words wasn't lost on Anthony, but before he could respond, another figure emerged from the shadows of the lighting booth. Dr. Harrison Wells, chairman of the theater board and local council member, had been quietly observing the entire scene. Sir Anthony, he said, approaching the stage, I must say, this is quite unexpected. We've been trying to drum up support for the theater's preservation, but having you here... He trailed off, his eyes calculating the possibilities. Ellie straightened, suddenly alert. Harrison, we agreed no business discussions during rehearsals. My apologies, Eleanor, he said smoothly, but timing is rather crucial here. The council meets next week to vote on Mr. Rothschild's development proposal. Having Sir Anthony's perspective on the cultural significance of this space could be invaluable. The teenagers had gathered in a tight group, their earlier confidence dimmed by the adult tension now filling the theater. Lily's hand found Maya Richardson's, squeezing it nervously. Anthony looked around the space again, seeing it now through multiple lenses. The past that had shaped him, the present struggling to survive, and a future hanging precariously in the eye. Balance. The ghost light seemed to burn brighter as if sensing its own mortality. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should discuss this further. But first, he turned back to the young actors. I believe we were in the middle of something rather important. For the next hour, the theater came alive with the kind of energy it had known in its glory days. Anthony worked with each young performer, drawing out nuances they hadn't known they possessed. Noah discovered the power of silence between lines. Maya found her character's vulnerability. Aidan learned to trust his instincts for comedy. And Lily soared. Her Lady Bracknell transformed from a caricature into a fully realized woman, her wheelchair becoming a throne from which she delivered Wilde's witticisms with devastating precision. Diane Fletcher, the theater's longtime costume designer, had slipped in during the session and was now sketching frantically in her ever-present notebook. The girl needs proper Victorian sleeves, she muttered to herself. And that hat. I know I have just the one in storage. As the impromptu workshop wound down, Oliver Ollie Blackwood, Ellie's teenage son, emerged from the technical booth where he'd been quietly filming the entire session on his phone. Mum, he called down, This is going viral. The comments are, blowing up. Ellie's face paled. Ollie, did you live stream this? Without permission? Not the whole thing, he defended. Just the best bits. People need to see what this place really means. Before anyone could respond, the theater's ancient heating system groaned ominously, and a distinct drip could be heard from somewhere in the ceiling. Ellie's shoulders sagged slightly. Another repair they couldn't afford. Grace Sullivan, who ran the cafe next door and had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward. I'll put the kettle on, she announced. This feels like a tea and planning moment if ever I saw one. As the group began to disperse, following the promise of Grace's legendary Earl Grey and scones, Anthony remained center stage. The ghost light cast strange shadows now, and in them he could almost see Richard Blackwood's approving smile. Sir Anthony? Lily had wheeled back to the edge of the stage. Thank you. Not just for the acting lessons, but for making me feel like, she paused, searching for the right words, like you belong here. He finished gently. She nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. My dear, he said, kneeling to meet her eye level. You do belong here. We all do. This stage, these boards, they have a way of claiming us, don't they? As they made their way to Grace's cafe, Anthony couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into something far more significant than a nostalgic visit. The theater had given him his voice all those years ago. Perhaps it was time to return the favor. But in the shadows of the back row, James Rothschild's empty seat seemed to mock their moment of connection. The developer had seen enough to know that his plans for Port Talbot's modernization had just encountered an unexpected obstacle. The question was, how much was he willing to risk to push those plans through? The ghost light burned on, keeping watch over the empty stage as it had done for generations. Tomorrow would bring its own drama, but for tonight, the old theater held its secrets close, waiting to see what act would unfold next in its ongoing story of survival, transformation, and the enduring power of finding one's true voice. The following morning dawned with the kind of misty rain that Port Talbot knew all too well. Anthony sat in Grace's cafe, watching droplets race down the window while contemplating the previous evening's events. The cafe, with its worn leather seats and walls covered in theatrical memorabilia, served as an unofficial green room for the theater next door. Grace placed a steaming cup of coffee before him. Black, no sugar, just as he'd always taken it. You know, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. I've been serving breakfast here for 30 years, and I've never seen the community quite so alive as it was last night. Before Anthony could respond, the cafe's door chimed. James Rothschild entered, shaking rain from his umbrella, his tailored suit incongruous among the cafe's shabby chic charm. The developer's presence seemed to lower the temperature in the room by several degrees. Sir Anthony Hopkins, Rothschild said, approaching with practiced confidence. I hoped I might find you here. James Rothschild, Port Talbot Development Corporation. He extended his hand, which Anthony took after a measured pause. Mr. Rothschild, I understand you have plans for this area. Please call me James. And yes, plans that could transform Port Talbot into a modern cultural hub. Would you mind if I joined you? I have something I'd like to show you. Grace appeared with another coffee cup, her usually warm smile notably absent. Rothschild pulled out a leather portfolio and spread several glossy renderings across the table. This is our vision for the Victoria Road Cultural Quarter, he explained, pointing to architectural drawings of gleaming glass structures. Boutique, shops, cafes, a modern multimedia center. We're talking about bringing Port Talbot into the 21st century. Anthony studied the drawings carefully. And the theater? Rothschild's smile tightened slightly. Ah, yes. Unfortunately, the building's structural assessment wasn't favorable. The cost of bringing it up to modern safety standards would be prohibitive. But look here, he pulled out another rendering. We're proposing a state-of-the-art black box theater within the new complex. Climate-controlled, perfect acoustics, digital capabilities, everything today's performers need. Everything except history, came a voice from behind them. Ellie Blackwood stood in the doorway, a stack of papers clutched to her chest. Everything except soul. Mrs. Blackwood, Rothschild acknowledged, his tone professionally cordial. I was just explaining to Sir Anthony how our development plans could benefit the entire community. By destroying its heart? Ellie moved to their table, spreading out her own papers, old programs, photographs, newspaper clippings. This isn't just about bricks and mortar, Mr. Rothschild. This is about legacy. Anthony picked up one of the photographs. It showed Richard Blackwood standing on the theater's stage, surrounded by young actors. The date on the back read, 1955. The structural issues, Anthony said carefully. How severe are they? Rothschild produced another document. The assessment was thorough. The roof needs complete replacement. The electrical system is dangerously outdated, and there's significant water damage to the load-bearing walls. Conservative estimate for repairs, $2.5 million. Ellie sank into a chair, which might as well be $25 million for all we can raise it. The cafe door chimed again. Dr. Harrison Wells entered, followed by several members of the town council. The morning's impromptu meeting was drawing an audience. Perhaps, Dr. Wells suggested, pulling up a chair, we should discuss this officially. The council meets next week to vote on the development proposal, but given Sir Anthony's unexpected involvement, we might want to explore other options. Rothschild's pleasant demeanor slipped slightly. The development timeline is already set. Delays could jeopardize our funding structure. And rushing forward could jeopardize something far more valuable, Anthony said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of stage training. I sat in that theater last night, Mr. Rothschild. I watched young performers discover their voices, just as I discovered mine there years ago. Some things can't be replaced with glass and steel, no matter how modern. The developer leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sir Anthony, I respect your connection to this place, but sentiment won't fix a failing roof or update dangerous wiring. The reality is that building is one bad storm away from being condemned. As if on cue, thunder rumbled overhead. Grace moved to close the cafe's windows against the intensifying rain. Then we fix it, Anthony said simply. With what money? Rothschild challenged. The town council can't afford it. The theater's operating budget barely covers monthly expenses, unless you're offering to write a check yourself. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Anthony looked at the photographs spread across the table, decades of performances, generations of dreamers who had found their voice on that stage. Actually, he said quietly, I might be. The cafe erupted in murmurs. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. Rothschild's professional mask cracked slightly. That's generous, the developer said carefully. But this isn't just about money. The entire area needs revitalization. A modern complex would bring jobs, tourism. So would a restored, historic theater, Dr. Wells interjected, especially with Sir Anthony's involvement. Rothschild gathered his renderings with precise movements. The council vote is next week. Perhaps we should all take time to consider our positions carefully. His gaze fixed on Anthony. History is important, Sir Anthony, but progress is inevitable. Don't let nostalgia cloud your judgment about what's best for Port Talbot's future. After he left, the cafe buzzed with excited conversation, but Anthony noticed Ellie's expression remained troubled. What is it? He asked. The structural assessment, she said. He's right about the problems, but she hesitated. Something feels wrong. Dad was obsessive about maintenance. Even after he retired, he made sure everything was properly looked after. For things to have deteriorated so badly so quickly. Before she could continue, Ollie burst into the cafe, his phone held out like a trophy. Mum, the video from last night. It's everywhere. People are sharing it, talking about the theater. Some of them are even offering to help. Dr. Wells perked up. What kind of numbers are we talking about? Thousands of views already. And look at the comments. People are sharing their own memories of the theater, asking how they can save it. Anthony watched the video over Ollie's shoulder. The boy had captured something magical, not just the acting lesson, but the spirit of the place itself. In the background, the ghost light cast its eternal glow, a silent guardian of theatrical tradition. This changes things, Dr. Wells mused. Public support could influence the council vote. It also paints a target on our backs, Ellie warned. Mr. Rothschild won't appreciate the publicity. As if summoned by her words, a tremendous crash echoed from next door. Everyone rushed to the cafe's windows. Through the rain, they could see that a section of the theater's marquee had collapsed, narrowly missing a group of pedestrians. "That's not possible," Ellie whispered. "That marquee was reinforced last year." Anthony moved to the door, but Grace caught his arm. "Wait," she said, pointing. Through the rain, they could see James Rothschild already on the scene, speaking to gathered onlookers, gesturing at the building with concerned authority. "Convenient timing," Anthony remarked quietly. Dr. Wells pulled out his phone. "I'll call an emergency council meeting. This changes everything." As the group dispersed to deal with the crisis, Anthony remained at the window, watching Rothschild direct what was quickly becoming a media spectacle. The developer caught his eye through the rain-streaked glass and offered a slight nod, almost a challenge. The battle lines were being drawn, and Anthony realized that saving the theater would require more than just money. It would need every skill he'd learned on that stage, every lesson about truth and performance, and perhaps a few new tricks as well. The ghost light in the theater flickered briefly as another rumble of thunder shook the street. The next act was beginning, and the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. Inside the theater, the damage was more extensive than the fallen marquee suggested. Water pooled on the stage where the roof had leaked, and the ancient electrical system sputtered ominously. Fire marshals had already cordoned off the building, their yellow tape a garish contrast to the theater's dignified facade. "This is a nightmare," Ellie muttered, watching from the lobby as emergency services conducted their assessment. "We had children performing here just last night." Lily Chen had arrived with her mother, both looking shell-shocked at the scene. "What about next week's showcase?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "We've been rehearsing for months." Anthony watched as James Rothschild spoke with reporters who had gathered outside. The developer's words carried through the open door. "Tragic. Deterioration of a beloved landmark. Public safety must be our primary concern. Modern facilities better suited to serving the community." "He's already writing our eulogy," Tori Pembroke observed bitterly, joining them in the lobby. "I've seen this before, you know. Developers find ways to accelerate decay when they want properties badly enough." Dr. Wells, who had been examining the structural damage with the fire marshal, approached their group. His expression was grave. "The initial assessment isn't good. They're recommending immediate closure pending a full structural review." "How long will that take?" Anthony asked. 2 weeks minimum, and given the visible damage." Dr. Wells shook his head. "The council won't wait that long to vote on Rothschild's proposal. Not with public safety concerns in play." Outside, camera flashes illuminated Rothschild's concerned expression as he detailed his vision for a safer, more modern Port Talbot. The performance was masterful, a developer reluctantly accepting the mantle of progress in the face of dangerous nostalgia. But Anthony had spent a lifetime studying performances, and he could see the subtle tells that betrayed Rothschild's satisfaction with the situation. The slightly too practiced concern, the carefully chosen words, the strategic positioning against the backdrop of damage. "Two can play at that game," Anthony murmured. Before anyone could stop him, he walked out into the rain, directly into the media circus. The reporters immediately swung their cameras toward him. Rothschild's practiced smile flickered briefly. "Sir Anthony, what brings you back to Port Talbot? Is it true you got your start in this theater? What do you think about the development plans?" Anthony raised his hands for silence, and decades of screen presence commanded immediate attention. "Last night," he began, his voice carrying clearly despite the rain, "I stood on that stage and watched a new generation of performers discover their voices. I saw a young woman in a wheelchair deliver Lady Bracknell's lines with more truth and power than I've seen in West End productions. I witnessed the same magic that changed my life, decades ago, still transforming lives today." He paused, letting the cameras capture his genuine emotion. "This isn't just about preserving a building. It's about protecting a sacred space where dreams take flight. Yes, there are challenges to overcome, Yes, there will be costs involved, but some things are worth saving, worth fighting for. The reporters pressed closer, sensing a story bigger than a local development dispute. Are you offering to help save the theater, Sir Anthony? He smiled, years of media training allowing him to control the narrative. I'm announcing my intention to establish the Port Talbot Theater Restoration Foundation with an initial personal commitment of $1 million toward the renovation costs. The announcement caused an immediate stir. Rothschild's expression darkened momentarily before he recovered his professional demeanor. Inside the lobby, Ellie gasped. Lily's eyes filled with tears of hope. Dr. Wells was already on his phone, presumably updating council members. Furthermore, Anthony continued, I'm calling on all those who understand the value of artistic heritage to join this effort. This theater has been giving to the community for generations. Now it's time for us to give back. Rothschild stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the narrative. While Sir Anthony's gesture is admirable, the issues here go beyond simple repairs. The entire area needs comprehensive redevelopment to what? Anthony interrupted smoothly. To replace history with homogeneity? To substitute soul with steel and glass? He turned to address the cameras directly. I've performed on stages all over the world, but it was here, in this theater, that I first learned the true meaning of performance. It wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about finding the courage to be myself. The rain had begun to ease, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the theater's facade. It was the kind of timing that even the best directors couldn't plan. Look, Anthony gestured to the building. Even now, she puts on a show for us. Shall we let this be her final performance? Or shall we give her the renovation she deserves so she can continue inspiring generations to come? The media attention had drawn a crowd of locals, including many former theater students and performers. Someone started applauding, and soon the whole street joined in. Rothschild maintained his composure, but his jaw tightened visibly. This is emotion over practicality, he said, just loud enough for Anthony to hear. The council will still vote next week. Yes, they will, Anthony agreed. But now they'll be voting in the spotlight. And I've found that spotlight has a way of revealing truth. Inside the lobby, Ollie was live streaming everything, his phone capturing the moment for social media. Grace had brought out tea and coffee for the emergency workers, turning the crisis into an impromptu community gathering. Dr. Wells approached Anthony as the media began to disperse. That was quite a performance, he said quietly. But Rothschild won't back down easily. He's invested too much in this development. No, Anthony agreed. He won't, which is why we need to understand what we're really fighting against. He turned to Ellie. Your father's maintenance records, where are they kept? In his old office upstairs. Why? Because something about this sudden deterioration doesn't add up. And in my experience, when things don't add up, someone's usually cooking the books. The ghost light flickered again, as if in agreement. The battle for the theater's soul was just beginning, and Anthony had a feeling that the real drama would unfold behind the scenes. The next morning found Anthony, Ellie, and Dr. Wells in Richard Blackwood's old office, surrounded by decades of meticulously kept maintenance records. Dust motes danced in the early light filtering through the window, giving the cramped space an almost ethereal quality. Dad never threw anything away, Ellie explained, pulling another box from the shelf. Every receipt, every inspection report, every contractor invoice, he kept them all. Anthony lifted a leather-bound ledger from 1955, the year he first stepped onto the theater stage. The pages were filled with Richard's precise handwriting, documenting every repair, no matter how minor. Look at this, Dr. Wells said, spreading several recent inspection reports across the desk. According to these, the roof began showing serious deterioration just 18 months ago. But here, he pulled out an older report. The same inspector gave it a clean bill of health 2 years ago. Different inspector, Ellie noted, examining the signatures. The original one retired and then... Let me guess, Anthony interrupted. The new inspector was recommended by Rothschild's development company. Ellie checked the letterhead. Port Talbot Urban Development Partners. That's one of his subsidiaries. The door creaked open, and Tori Pembroke entered, carrying a stack of local newspapers. "You might want to see these," she said, spreading them across the already crowded desk. "I've been going through the archives. Every property Rothschild's company has developed in South Wales followed the same pattern. Historic buildings suddenly developing structural issues, convenient accidents, emergency closures. And always just before council votes, Dr. Wells added, scanning the articles. "He's been orchestrating this for years." Anthony picked up one of the newspapers, studying a photograph of Rothschild at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. "The question is, how do we prove it?" A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Zara Patel, the local journalist who'd been documenting the theater's struggles, stood in the doorway, her press badge hanging around her neck. "Maybe I can help with that," she said, holding up her phone. "I've been doing some digging of my own. The inspection company that condemned those other buildings, it was created 3 years ago, right after Rothschild started his South Wales expansion. The company's registered address? A post office box in Cardiff that traces back to one of his holding companies." Ellie sank into her father's old chair. So the inspections were rigged from the start. But why go to all this trouble? There are other properties he could develop. "Location," Dr. Wells said, moving to the window. "This stretch of Victoria Road is the last piece of old Port Talbot that isn't under developer control. Once the theater falls, the rest will follow like dominoes." Anthony walked to the window, standing beside Dr. Wells. Below, the Spotlight Squad members were gathering on the street, their showcase rehearsal relocated to the church hall across the way. Lily Chen sat in her wheelchair, script in hand, watching the theater with obvious longing. "We need more than just suspicions," Anthony said. "We need concrete evidence before the council vote." "I might know someone who could help," Zara offered. "A former employee of Rothschild's company who reached out to me last month. He wanted to talk but got scared off. Maybe if Sir Anthony made the approach." A commotion from the street drew their attention. James Rothschild had arrived with a team of surveyors, their official-looking vests bearing the logo of yet another subsidiary company. "Additional structural assessment," Rothschild announced to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying up to the office window. "Just being thorough in the interest of public safety." "More like manufacturing evidence," Tori muttered. Anthony watched the surveyors enter the building, their equipment looking surprisingly light for a detailed structural assessment. "Dr. Wells, as a council member, do you have the authority to request an independent inspection?" "Yes, but it would take weeks to arrange. The vote is in 5 days." "What about the original inspector?" Ellie asked suddenly, rifling through the older reports. "The one who retired, Malcolm Davies. He did every inspection for 20 years before Rothschild's company took over." "Last I heard, he'd moved to Swansea," Tori said. "Keeps in touch with Christmas cards. Still has family in Port Talbot." Anthony's eyes narrowed as he watched Rothschild directing his team below. "Find him," he said. "Today. And Zara, get me everything you have on that former employee. It's time we did some investigating of our own." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. While Rothschild's surveyors conducted their assessment, taking suspicious photographs of minor cracks and water stains, the theater's defenders launched their own campaign. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ollie Blackwood, proving himself more than just a social media enthusiast, began compiling a digital timeline of the theater's maintenance history, cross-referencing his grandfather's meticulous records with local weather reports and construction permits. Grace Sullivan converted her cafe into an impromptu command center, her usual customers sharing stories of the theater's impact on their lives. Zara recorded everything, building a narrative that went far beyond mere structural concerns. By mid-afternoon, Tori had located Malcolm Davies. The retired inspector, now in his 70s, agreed to meet them that evening. He was quite interested. "When I mentioned Sir Anthony's involvement," Tori reported, "said he'd bring his old inspection records. But they weren't the only ones making moves. Throughout the day, expensive cars with tinted windows cruised slowly past the theater. Men in suits conducted whispered conversations on phones, their eyes constantly scanning the street. "They're worried," Dr. Wells observed. "Rothschilds never faced this kind of organized resistance before." As evening approached, the Spotlight Squad gathered again, this time in Grace's cafe. Their showcase rehearsal had been challenging in the unfamiliar church hall, but their spirits remained high. "We've been talking," Lily announced, wheeling up to Anthony's table. "About the showcase. We want to change the program." "Oh?" Anthony set down his coffee cup. "What did you have in mind?" "Instead of the importance of being earnest, we want to tell the theater's story. Our story. Everyone's story." She gestured to her fellow young actors. "Maya's grandmother performed here in the 1960s. Aiden's parents met during a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Noah's uncle built sets for 30 years. A living history," Anthony mused, understanding dawning. "Not just performances on a stage, but the stage itself performing." "Exactly." Lily's eyes shone with enthusiasm. "We've already started writing it. We thought maybe you could help? Direct it even?" Before Anthony could respond, the cafe's door burst open. Malcolm Davies entered, clutching a weathered briefcase, his face flushed with anger. "Where's Ellie?" he demanded. "She needs to see this right away." Ellie emerged from the back room where she'd been reviewing more records. "Mr. Davies, what's wrong?" The retired inspector dropped his briefcase on the nearest table, hands shaking as he opened it. "These bloody bastards," he muttered, pulling out a stack of photographs. "Look at these. The roof support system I inspected 18 months ago. Perfect condition, new steel reinforcements all up to code." He spread the photos across the table. They showed a robust structural system, clearly well-maintained and modern. "Now look at what's there today." He pulled out his phone, displaying pictures he'd taken from the street. "Those supports are gone, removed. This wasn't decay, this was deliberate sabotage." The cafe fell silent. Even the youngest Spotlight Squad members understood the implications. "We need to call the police," Dr. Wells said, reaching for his phone. "Wait." Anthony held up his hand. "If we move too quickly, evidence might disappear. We need to be strategic about this." Zara stepped forward. "My contact, the former employee. He's agreed to meet tonight. Said he has documents, internal memos about the theater project." "It's all connected," Ellie whispered, staring at the photographs. The inspections, the sudden damages, the timing of the vote. Anthony stood, his stage presence naturally drawing all eyes. "Then we have less than 12 hours to put together the performance of our lives. One that will expose the truth and save this theater." He turned to Lily and her fellow young actors. "Your showcase idea, how quickly can you be ready?" Lily straightened in her wheelchair, her chin lifting with determination. "Give us the stage and we'll be ready." "You might get more than just the stage," Anthony smiled. "How do you feel about a little live television coverage?" The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. While Zara went to meet her confidential source, the others began preparing for what would either be the theater's final bow or its greatest triumph. The ghost light burned steadily through it all, casting long shadows across the stage where generations of dreamers had found their voice. Tomorrow would bring either devastation or salvation, and everyone in that cafe knew that the next act would determine not just the theater's fate, but the soul of Port Talbot itself. As midnight approached, Grace's cafe remained illuminated, a beacon of resistance against the darkened theater next door. The Spotlight Squad had taken over one corner, furiously writing and rehearsing their new piece while Malcolm Davies continued examining his old records with Dr. Wells. "Here's another discrepancy," Malcolm pointed out, his finger tracing a line in his logbook. "The electrical system we installed in 2015, rated for 30 years minimum. Now they're claiming it's completely shot?" Anthony watched the young actors work, their energy reminiscent of his own early days. Lily was directing from her wheelchair, her natural leadership abilities shining through as she helped shape their collective stories into a coherent narrative. "Sir Anthony," Noah called out, "could you look at this scene?" We're trying to capture the moment when you first performed here. Before Anthony could respond, Zara burst through the cafe door, her face pale. We have a problem, she announced. My source. He's gone. Gone? Ellie stood up from where she'd been helping with the script. What do you mean, gone? His flat's empty. Neighbor said men in suits helped him move out this afternoon. Very suddenly. Zara ran a hand through her hair in frustration. But he managed to get me this first. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Said it's only part of what he has, but... Ollie grabbed his laptop, plugging in the drive. Everyone gathered around as files began populating the screen. Internal emails, project timelines, and most damning of all, a series of photographs showing systematic damage being done to the theater's infrastructure. Look at the metadata, Ollie pointed out. These photos were taken months ago, before any structural issues were reported. Dr. Wells studied the emails carefully. This is good, but without your source to verify it. It might not be enough, Anthony finished. He turned to Malcolm. How quickly can you prepare a detailed report? Comparing your records with the current condition? Give me till morning. I'll document every single manipulation they've made. The cafe door chimed again. This time it was James Rothschild himself, looking immaculate despite the late hour. The room fell silent. Working late, I see, he observed. His tone casual but his eyes sharp. I thought you might like to know the council has agreed to move the vote up. Tomorrow afternoon, in fact, given the public safety concerns. That's not legal, Dr. Wells protested. There are notification requirements. Emergency provisions. Rothschild smiled. Perfectly legal when public safety is at risk. Though, he glanced at the USB drive still plugged into Ollie's laptop. I should warn you that sharing potentially confidential corporate documents could lead to some rather unpleasant legal consequences. The threat hung in the air, but Anthony had faced far more intimidating opponents across negotiating tables in Hollywood. Fascinating timing, he said, rising to face Rothschild. Almost as fascinating as the sudden disappearance of your former employee. Tell me, Mr. Rothschild, how much does it cost to make someone vanish overnight? The developer's smile never wavered. I wouldn't know. Though I imagine it's less expensive than trying to save a condemned building. Speaking of which, he pulled an envelope from his jacket. I have an alternative proposal for you, Sir Anthony, one that could benefit everyone. Everyone except the soul of this community, Lily spoke up, wheeling forward. This theater gave me my voice. It gave all of us our voices. What gives you the right to take that away? Rothschild's expression softened slightly as he looked at the girl. Progress requires change, young lady. Sometimes we have to let go of the past to embrace the future. The past isn't just a building, Anthony said quietly. It's the foundation we build our future upon. Something you seem to have forgotten in your rush to pour concrete over everything that makes this town unique. The developer placed the envelope on a nearby table. My offer stands until noon tomorrow. After that, he shrugged. Well, progress waits for no one. After he left, Ellie picked up the envelope but didn't open it. He's scared, she said. All this maneuvering. He knows we're close to exposing something. Then let's make sure we do, Anthony replied. He turned to the spotlight squad. How do you feel about performing for the council tomorrow? Maya, who had been quietly observing everything, spoke up. What if we did more than just perform? What if we showed them? Showed them what? Tori asked. Everything. Maya gestured to the USB drive, the photographs, Malcolm's records. Not just our stories, but the whole truth, like a performance documentary. Anthony's eyes lit up. A piece of documentary theater, immediate, urgent, real. He looked at Zara. How quickly can you get news cameras here? For Sir Anthony, Hopkins directing an emergency performance to save a historic theater? They're probably already on their way. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The young actors integrated the new evidence into their performance piece, while Malcolm and Dr. Wells prepared their technical presentation. Grace kept the coffee flowing, and Ollie worked with Zara to create a multimedia backdrop using the damning photographs and documents. As dawn broke over Port Talbot, the ghost light finally dimmed, giving way to the working lights as the stage came alive with preparation. The theater might be damaged, but its spirit was far from broken. Anthony watched as Lily ran the cast through their final rehearsal. In her, he saw echoes of every dreamer who had ever found refuge on these boards. In all of them, he saw the future that Rothschild's steel and glass could never contain. The developer's envelope remained unopened on the cafe table, a symbol of everything they were fighting against. In a few hours, the council would vote on the theater's fate. But first, they would witness something more powerful than any corporate presentation: the truth, performed by those who had lived it. The council chamber was packed by noon, with television cameras lining the back wall and reporters filling every available space. James Rothschild sat in the front row, flanked by his legal team, his confident smile never wavering. But Anthony, who had spent decades studying human behavior for his roles, noticed the developer's right hand repeatedly adjusting his tie, a tell of nervous energy. The spotlight squad had set up in the chamber's presentation area, their makeshift stage marked by simple tape lines on the floor. Lily positioned her wheelchair at center stage, her script clutched tightly in her lap. The other young actors moved around her with quiet determination, each carrying pieces of the theater's history they were about to share. "Are you sure about this?" Ellie whispered to Anthony. "Using children to fight our battle?" "They're not fighting our battle," he replied. "They're fighting for their own future. Sometimes the most powerful truth comes from the youngest voices." Council Chairman Margaret Thorne called the emergency session to order, her gavel cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Given the urgent nature of the structural concerns," she began, "we've convened this special session to—" "Point of order," Dr. Wells interrupted, standing. "Before we proceed, I'd like to request that we hear from some community members who have prepared a special presentation." Rothschild's lawyers immediately objected, citing procedural regulations, but Anthony had already moved to the podium. "Madam Chairman," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of theatrical training, "what you're about to see isn't just a presentation. It's evidence. Evidence of systematic destruction of cultural heritage, of manufactured safety concerns, and of a conspiracy to defraud this council and this community." The chamber erupted in whispers. Rothschild's hand went to his tie again. "You have 15 minutes, Chairman Thorne declared, ignoring the developer's protests. Lily wheeled to center, stage as the lights dimmed. Behind her, a projection screen lowered, showing the theater's facade from 1955. "My name is Lily Chen," she began, her voice clear and strong. "And this is the story of how I found my voice. But it's not just my story. It's the story of everyone who ever stepped onto that stage, everyone who ever dared to dream in the dark." The performance that followed was unlike anything the council chamber had ever seen. The young actors moved seamlessly between personal testimonies and historical reenactments, while behind them, Ollie's carefully curated evidence played across the screen. Maya stepped forward, portraying her grandmother in the 1960s. "We performed through power cuts and winter storms. The theater was our shelter, our sanctuary. Noah, as his uncle, the set builder. Every nail, every board, every paint stroke, and we did it for love. This place was built on love." Aiden, reading from Richard Blackwood's maintenance logs. October 15th, 2015. New roof supports installed. Rated for 30 years minimum. Inspected and approved by Malcolm Davies. The screen behind them showed Malcolm's original photographs alongside recent images of the deliberately damaged supports. Sophie, the technical prodigy, had synchronized the evidence with their performances perfectly. Each revelation landed with precision timing. Emails discussing the accelerated deterioration program, photographs of nighttime construction crews removing rather than repairing crucial structures, financial records showing the web of shell, companies all leading back to Rothschild development. Anthony watched Rothschild's face as the evidence mounted. The developer maintained his composure, but his legal team was frantically passing notes back and forth. Then came the moment they'd been preparing for. Lily wheeled to the very edge of their makeshift stage, looking directly at the council members. "Last night," she said, "a man offered to buy our silence. to pay us to look the other way while he destroyed not just a building, but the dreams of generations. She produced Rothschild's unopened envelope. We didn't even need to read it, because some things can't be bought. Some things are worth fighting for. She ripped the envelope in half, letting the pieces fall to the floor. The chamber was absolutely silent. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes, captivated by the raw authenticity of the performance. But they weren't finished. The young actors moved into their final sequence, each stepping forward to share a dream that had been born on the theater's stage. Maya. I want to direct films that tell our stories. Noah. I'm going to write plays that make people think. Aiden. That stage taught me I could be more than my circumstances. Sophie. In the lighting booth, I learned that magic is real. Finally, Lily spoke again, and I learned that this wheelchair doesn't define my abilities. On that stage, I can be anyone, do anything. That's what Mr. Rothschild wants to tear down. Not just bricks and mortar, but possibility itself. The screen behind them filled with faces. Hundreds of photographs of past performers, crew members, audience members. The theater's true legacy written in human terms. Anthony stepped forward as the images faded. Members of the council, you're not just voting on a building permit today. You're voting on whether to preserve or destroy the heart of this community. The evidence you've seen proves that the theater's structural issues were deliberately manufactured. But more importantly, you've seen proof of something else. The undeniable power of this space to transform lives. He turned to face Rothschild directly. You can build shopping centers anywhere, Mr. Rothschild. But you can't manufacture soul. You can't replicate 68 years of dreams, hopes, and possibilities. Rothschild stood, his composure finally cracking. This is emotional manipulation. These children have been coached to tell the truth, Lily interrupted. The only coaching we needed was the example this theater has set for generations, the example of standing up for what matters. Chairman Thorne's gavel cracked against her desk. I think we've seen enough to justify a full investigation before any vote can proceed. She turned to the council's legal advisor. Please contact the proper authorities regarding the evidence of fraudulent inspections and deliberate property damage. Rothschild's lawyers immediately began damage control, but the developer himself stood silent, staring at the young performers with an unreadable expression. As the chamber erupted in activity, Anthony noticed something unexpected, a tear rolling down Rothschild's cheek. The developer quickly wiped it away, but not before Anthony recognized something in his eyes. Recognition. You performed here too, didn't you? Anthony asked quietly, approaching him. That's why you wanted this particular theater so badly, not just for the location, but to bury something. Rothschild's mask cracked further. 1975, he said softly. I was Hamlet. Thought I'd be the next great classical actor. Life had other plans. It's not too late, Anthony suggested, to honor that dream differently. Before Rothschild could respond, reporters swarmed around them, cameras flashing. The developer straightened his tie one final time and walked out of the chamber without another word. Outside, a crowd had gathered. The spotlight squad emerged to cheers and applause, their impromptu performance already becoming local legend. But Anthony's attention was drawn to the theater across the street. The ghost light was visible through the window, still burning despite everything. Still keeping watch, still holding space for dreams yet to come. Ellie joined him at the chamber entrance. It's not over, is it? No, Anthony agreed. Rothschild may have lost this battle, but developers like him don't give up easily. We've bought time, nothing more. Time is all we need, Lily said, wheeling up beside them. Time to show everyone what this theater can still become. Anthony looked at the young actress, seeing in her the same fire he'd felt on that stage decades ago. Then let's not waste a moment. The real performance is just beginning. The ghost light seemed to burn brighter in agreement, as if knowing that its vigil would continue, protecting not just a building but the infinite possibilities that lived within its walls. The morning after the council hearing dawned with unexpected news. James Rothschild had disappeared. His office was empty, his phone disconnected, and his lawyers were issuing terse, no comments to the press gathering outside the development company's headquarters. Anthony sat in Grace's cafe, watching BBC Wales report on the developer's sudden vanishing act. The ticker beneath the news anchor read, Port Talbot Theatre Scandal, key developer missing after fraud allegations. It doesn't make sense, Zara said, spreading newspaper clippings across the table. I've been tracking Rothschild's developments for years. He doesn't run from fights, he escalates them. Grace placed fresh coffee cups before them, her usual cheerful demeanor tempered by concern. Maybe we scared him off with all that evidence. No. Anthony shook his head. There's something else. Something we're missing. The cafe door chimed, as Ellie rushed in, clutching a manila envelope. You need to see this, she said, her voice tight with emotion. It was delivered to the theater this morning, no return address. Inside the envelope were photographs, dozens of them spanning decades, all from productions at the Port Talbot Theatre. And in many of them, a young James Rothschild took center stage. 1075 to 1978, Ellie noted, arranging the photos chronologically. He wasn't just in one production. He was in everything. Hamlet, Macbeth, Death of a Salesman. Anthony picked up a particular photo that caught his eye. It showed young James in costume as Romeo, standing beside a striking young woman as Juliet. Behind them, Richard Blackwood, Ellie's father, beamed with obvious pride. Wait, Ellie. Grabbed the photo. That's my mother. The cafe fell silent. Grace dropped a coffee cup, the crash echoing through the stunned space. Your mother? Anthony studied the photograph more closely. But I thought, she died when I was very young, Ellie said softly. Dad never talked much about her, just said she'd been his greatest student, that she'd loved the theater more than anything. Zara was already on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Here, she said after a moment. Local newspaper archive, 1978. Rising star leaves Port Talbot for London stage. It's about Sarah Blackwood, your mother. She was offered a role in the West End, alongside James Rothschild. More pieces began falling into place as they dug deeper. Sarah and James had been the theater's golden couple, both destined for stardom. They'd left Port Talbot together, chasing dreams of professional success. But Mom came back, Ellie whispered, reading further. 6 months later, gave up London to return here. And James went on to business school instead of acting. Anthony finished, remembering their brief conversation at the council meeting. Life had other plans, he said. The cafe door chimed again. This time it was Tori Pembroke, looking like she'd seen a ghost. You've started putting it together, haven't you? She asked, seeing the photographs spread across the table. About Sarah and James? You knew? Ellie demanded. Tori sank into a chair. We all did, those of us from that time. Your mother and James, they were going to change the world. Their Romeo and Juliet was legendary, but then what? Sarah discovered she was pregnant. With you, Ellie. She came back to Port Talbot, back to your father. James, he didn't take it well. Switched to business school, vowed he'd prove he could be more successful than any actor. And he never set foot in a theater again. The implications hung heavy in the air. Anthony watched Ellie's face as she processed this revelation about her own history. So this whole development plan, Zara said slowly, it wasn't just about property values. It was personal. Revenge? Grace suggested. Or pain, Anthony mused. The kind that festers for decades, turning dreams into poison. Before they could discuss it further, Ollie burst through the door, his laptop clutched to his chest. Mom, everyone, the theater, you have to see this. They rushed across the street. The theater's front doors stood open, and inside, they saw, lobby had been transformed. Every surface gleamed, the brass fixtures polished to a mirror shine. The old playbills had been professionally reframed, arranged in a stunning chronological display. And at the center of it all, a new glass case held a single item, a skull prop from the 1975 production of Hamlet. It's all like this, Ollie said, leading them into the auditorium. Everything's been restored. The roof, the electrical system, even the seats. It must have happened overnight, he was right. The theater looked better than it had in decades. Every issue they documented had been immaculately repaired. The ghost light still burned center stage, but now it illuminated a space restored to its former glory. There's more. Ollie opened his laptop. The theater's bank account. Someone deposited £5 million early this morning, and this was uploaded to the theater's website 10 minutes ago. He pressed play on a video. James Rothschild's face filled the screen, but not the polished developer they'd known. This James looked older, tired, his corporate mask stripped away. To the Port Talbot theater community, he began, and especially to Eleanor Blackwood. What you're about to hear is both a confession and, I hope, a redemption. The video continued as James revealed everything, how he'd spent decades building his development empire, always planning to return to Port Talbot, how he'd intended to destroy the theater that represented his greatest loss, only to find himself unable to follow through. Watching those young performers yesterday, he said in the video, I saw myself. I saw Sarah. I saw every dream I'd tried to bury under concrete and steel. The theater wasn't just Sarah's love, it was mine too. And in trying to destroy it, I've been trying to destroy the best part of myself. Anthony watched Ellie's face as she learned the truth about her mother through the words of a man who had loved her, lost her, and spent decades trying to erase that pain. The restoration work has been completed, James continued. The endowment should ensure the theater's survival for generations to come. I've also established a scholarship fund in Sarah Blackwood's name to help young performers follow their dreams, wherever those dreams may lead. The video ended with James standing on the theater stage, looking smaller somehow, more human. I won't ask for forgiveness, he said. But perhaps this can be my final performance. The one where I finally play the role I should have played 40 years ago. The role of someone who believes in the power of dreams even when they don't turn out the way we planned. The ghost light seemed to pulse as the video ended, as if acknowledging this unexpected turn in the theater's ongoing story. Well, Anthony said into the stunned silence, it appears our antagonist just rewrote his own character arc. But where is he now? Zara wondered, already making notes for her story. Gone, I expect, Tori said. Some performances are meant to be one night only. Ellie stood center stage, beneath the ghost light, holding the photograph of her mother and James as young lovers ready to conquer the world. All these years, she said softly. Dad protected me from this story. Protected both of us, really. James and my mother. They were the theater's greatest romance, Tori said gently, until life wrote them a different ending. And now? Grace asked, looking around at the beautifully restored space. Now, Anthony said, moving to stand beside Ellie, we honor all of it. The dreams that came true, the dreams that didn't, and most importantly, the dreams still waiting in the wings. As is, if on cue, the Spotlight Squad began arriving for their regularly scheduled rehearsal. They stopped in the doorway, amazed by the theater's transformation. Lily wheeled forward, her face glowing in the ghost light. It's beautiful, she breathed. But what happened? Anthony looked at the photograph in Ellie's hands, then at the young performers standing in the same space where James and Sarah had once stood. What happened, he said, is that sometimes the greatest acts of love come disguised as something else entirely. Sometimes it takes 40 years to deliver the right performance. The ghost light flickered, almost like a wink, as if to say that it had known all along, had kept watch through decades of drama, waiting for this moment of resolution. But as they would soon discover, this wasn't the final act. It was merely the end of one story and the beginning of another. Because in theater, as in life, every ending carries the seeds of a new beginning. The revelation of James Rothschild's connection to the theater and his subsequent redemptive act created a media sensation that extended far beyond Port Talbot. By the following morning, the story had gone international, with headlines focusing on the dramatic twist, Developer's Secret Past Saves Historic Theater, and Romeo Returns, a theater's tale of lost love and redemption. But for those inside, the theater, the real work was just beginning. Anthony sat in the newly restored auditorium, watching as Ellie sorted through boxes of memorabilia that had mysteriously appeared alongside the renovation. Each box contained carefully preserved programs, photographs, and notes from productions spanning 4 decades. "Look at this," Ellie said, holding up a handwritten letter. "It's from my mother to James, written just before she left London. She knew she was pregnant, knew she had to choose." Anthony took the letter gently, recognizing the weight of history in his hands. "Are you sure you want to read it?" "I need to," Ellie replied. "I need to understand all of it." The letter revealed Sarah Blackwood's inner turmoil, her love for James, her connection to the theater, and her ultimate decision to return to Port Talbot. "Some stages," she had written, "are bigger than the West End. Some roles more important than any we could play in London." As Ellie read, Zara burst into the theater, her journalist's instincts clearly fired up. "You're not going to believe this," she announced, waving her phone. "James Rothschild's development company just announced a new initiative. They're creating a national fund for preserving historic theaters across the UK. They're calling it the Sarah Blackwood Foundation for Theatrical Heritage." The ghost light seemed to brighten at this news, casting new shadows across the restored stage. "That's not all," Zara continued. "The BBC wants to do a documentary, not just about the theater's salvation, but about its entire history. They're calling it Stages of Life, the Port Talbot Theatre Story." Tori Pembroke, who had been helping catalog costumes in the newly organized wardrobe department, emerged with a stunning discovery. "The Romeo and Juliet costumes," she said, holding up 2 carefully preserved outfits. "From James and Sarah's production. He kept them all these years." The theater was quickly becoming more than just a restored building. It was transforming into a living museum of theatrical history and human drama. But amidst the excitement, Anthony noticed something that concerned him. The spotlight squad, particularly Lily, seemed subdued during their rehearsals. The young performers had been thrust into the spotlight themselves, their story now intertwined with the theater's legacy in unexpected ways. "What's troubling you?" he asked Lily after a particularly distracted rehearsal. She wheeled to the edge of the stage, looking out at the empty seats. "What if we can't live up to it? All this history, all these stories. What if we're not good enough to carry it forward?" Anthony sat beside her, remembering his own moments of doubt on this very stage. "You know what Richard Blackwood told me once? He said the theater doesn't need us to be perfect, it needs us to be honest. Everything else follows from that." "But now everyone's watching," Lily said. "The BBC, the newspapers, they're all waiting to see what happens next. Then let's show them something they've never seen before." Anthony gathered the entire spotlight squad, along with Ellie, Zara, and the other theater regulars. "I have a proposal," he announced. "Instead of just being subjects of the BBC documentary, why don't we create our own story, something that combines everything we've learned, the history, the drama, the truth about James and Sarah, and most importantly, your own journeys on this stage." The young performers exchanged glances, interest sparking in their eyes. "You mean like what we did at the council meeting?" Noah asked. "But bigger." "Much bigger," Anthony confirmed. "A full production that weaves together past and present, using all the stories we've discovered. We'll call it Ghostlight, the heart of Port Talbot." The idea caught fire immediately. Maya began sketching possible scene transitions. Sophie dove into the technical possibilities offered by the newly restored lighting system. Aidan and Noah started improvising dialogue that mixed historical quotes with contemporary perspectives. But it was Lily who provided the crucial insight. "What if we made it interactive?" she suggested. "Not just us telling the story, but involving the audience in it. Make them part of the theater's history too." The concept evolved rapidly. They would transform the entire theater into a performance space with scenes playing out in the lobby, the dressing rooms, even the technical booth. The audience would move through the building's history, experiencing different eras and stories, all culminating in a powerful finale on the main stage. Dr. Wells, who had stopped by to check on the renovation work, recognized the promotional potential immediately. This could put Port Talbot Theatre on the national arts map, he said, especially with Sir Anthony Hopkins directing. The next few days became a whirlwind of activity. Zara used her media contacts to build anticipation. Grace converted her cafe into a rehearsal space for smaller scenes. The BBC documentary crew, initially planning to simply record events, found themselves being incorporated into the production itself. But as the creative excitement built, new challenges emerged. The pressure of creating something worthy of the theater's legacy began to take its toll. Arguments broke out over scene interpretations. Some of the younger performers struggled with the emotional weight of portraying real historical figures. Then came the technical difficulties. The newly restored systems, while state-of-the-art, required extensive training to operate. Power fluctuations caused lighting glitches during crucial rehearsals. The interactive elements proved more complex than anticipated. Anthony watched it, all with a mixture of concern and recognition. He'd seen this pattern before, the moment when ambition collides with reality, when dreams meet the hard work of making them come true. One evening, after a particularly challenging rehearsal, he found Ellie sitting alone in her father's old office, surrounded by photographs and letters. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently. "Not about the show," she said, holding up a photo of her mother in costume. "About understanding. All these years I thought I knew my mother's story. Thought I knew why she came back, why she chose this theater over London. But now you're seeing it through James's eyes too." "Through everyone's eyes," Ellie corrected. "Every person who ever performed here, every dream that found a home on that stage. It's overwhelming sometimes, isn't it? The weight of all those stories?" Before Anthony could respond, a commotion erupted from the auditorium. They rushed out to find the ghost light flickering erratically, casting strange shadows across the stage where the spotlight squad had been rehearsing. "It's been doing that all evening," Sophie called from the lighting booth. "Like it's trying to tell us something." Lily wheeled to center stage, directly under the stuttering light. "Maybe it is," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's reminding us that every performance, every story, every moment in this theater, they're all connected by this light. It's been here through everything." The ghost light steadied, as if in agreement. "That's it," Anthony said, inspiration striking. "That's our through line. The ghost light becomes our narrator, our constant presence. It's witnessed every triumph, every heartbreak, every dream that's lived on this stage." The concept energized the entire company. The production began to coalesce around the ghost light's perspective, an eternal observer of human drama, keeper of theatrical traditions, guardian of stories both told and untold. As opening night approached, word spread beyond Port Talbot. Theatre companies from across the UK expressed interest. The BBC expanded their documentary plans. Even London's West End began paying attention to the small Welsh theatre that had sparked a national conversation about art, heritage, and the power of local theatres. But perhaps the most significant development came in the form of a small package, delivered to the theatre 3 days before opening night. Inside was a simple note from James Rothschild, along with 2 items: the skull prop he had used as Hamlet in 1975, and his original copy of Romeo's lines, with Sarah's handwritten notes in the margins. The note read, "Some props carry more than just theatrical weight. These belong to 2 young dreamers who thought they could conquer the world from a stage in Port Talbot. Perhaps they can serve a new generation of dreamers now. Break a leg." Lily held the skull during that evening's rehearsal, feeling the connection to the theater's history in her hands. "It's real now, isn't it?" she said to Anthony. "All of it. The history, the responsibility, the future." "It always was," he replied. "We just needed the right light to see it." The ghost light burned steadily above them, keeper of secrets, witness to transformations, eternal guardian of theatrical magic. In its glow, past and present merged, and the next act of the Port Talbot Theatre's story waited in the wings. As the final days before opening night ticked away, the theater hummed, with an energy that seemed to vibrate through its very foundations. The ghost light's steady illumination watched over increasingly intense rehearsals, as the company worked to perfect every aspect of their ambitious production. The BBC documentary crew, led by veteran director Margaret Hayes, had become an almost constant presence, capturing not just the preparation for the show, but the deeper story of transformation taking place within the theater's walls. "It's more than just a local theater piece now," Margaret observed to Anthony during a brief break. "This is becoming a statement about the importance of cultural heritage, about the power of community theater in an age of digital entertainment." The pressure of that growing significance wasn't lost on anyone. Late one night, Anthony found Noah alone on the stage, running his lines with increasing frustration. "I keep thinking about him," Noah said when Anthony approached. "James Rothschild playing this same role on this same stage. How do I make it my own when I'm literally walking in his footsteps?" "By remembering that his story isn't yours," Anthony replied. "Yes, you're playing Romeo, but you're also playing every young person who's ever found their voice here. That's the beauty of theater. It's both timeless and immediate, universal and deeply personal." The ghost light seemed to pulse in agreement, casting Noah's shadow across the stage like an echo of all the Romeos who had come before. The interactive elements of the production were proving particularly challenging. Grace's cafe had been transformed into a 1970s-era green room where audiences would witness recreated moments from the theater's past. The technical booth became a time capsule of theatrical innovation, with Sophie orchestrating a complex display of lighting evolution through the decades. But it was in the main auditorium where the most ambitious elements would unfold. The production team had developed a system of rotating stages and moving platforms that would allow scenes to flow seamlessly between different time periods, all while maintaining the ghost light as a constant watching presence. "The logistics are nightmare," Ellie admitted during a production meeting. "But when it works..." She gestured to where Lily was rehearsing a pivotal scene, her wheelchair becoming part of the choreography as she moved through different eras of the theater's history. The young actress had developed a remarkable ability to channel different historical figures while maintaining her own unique presence. In one moment, she was Sarah Blackwood contemplating her return to Port Talbot. In the next, she was a modern performer proving that limitations existed only in the mind. The costume department, under Tori's meticulous supervision, had created pieces that could transform with simple adjustments, allowing the performers to shift between time periods without leaving the stage. The effect, when combined with the innovative lighting design, was magical. "It's like the theater itself is breathing," Maya observed during a technical rehearsal. "Like we're inside a living thing that's remembering its own story." 2 days before opening night, an unexpected package arrived from London. Inside was a collection of original West End playbills from 1978, including the production that Sarah Blackwood and James Rothschild had briefly been part of. More significantly, there was a letter from the London Theatre Society, expressing interest in featuring Port Talbot's production as part of a national initiative to preserve regional theaters. "They want to use us as a model," Dr. Wells announced, excitedly. "A template for how historic theaters can remain relevant while honoring their heritage." The news added another layer of pressure to an already intense situation. That evening's rehearsal was particularly difficult, with technical glitches and forgotten lines threatening to undermine confidence. "Maybe we're trying to do too much," Ellie worried, watching another scene break down. "Maybe we should simplify." But Anthony saw something different in the chaos. "Watch," he said, pointing to how the company was handling each crisis. The younger performers were supporting each other, finding creative solutions, adapting in real time. The ghost light's steady illumination seemed to gather their collective energy, focusing it like a lens. "This is exactly what theater is supposed to be," he continued. "Not just performance, but transformation. Every problem we solve, every challenge we overcome, it's all part of the story we're telling." The next morning brought another surprise. Local businesses, inspired by the theater's renaissance, had organized a festival to coincide with opening night. Victoria Road would be transformed into a celebration of Port Talbot's cultural heritage, with performances, art installations, and historical displays. "The whole town is becoming part of the show," Zara marveled, documenting the preparations for her ongoing coverage. As final rehearsals began, something remarkable started happening. The various elements, technical, performative, historical, began flowing together with an almost organic harmony. The ghost light's illumination seemed to strengthen, its glow touching every corner of the theater with an almost sentient awareness. During the last run-through before opening night, Anthony watched from the back of the auditorium as past and present merged on stage. The young performers moved through time periods with fluid grace, their stories interweaving with the theater's history in ways that felt both choreographed and spontaneous. Lily, in a particularly powerful moment, addressed the ghost light directly. "You've seen it all, haven't you? Every dream, every heartbreak, every moment of magic. You've kept watch while generations found their voice on these boards, and now you're watching us add our chapter to your story." The ghost light flickered in response, casting shadows that seemed to dance with ancient theatrical memories. After the final rehearsal, the company gathered on stage for a moment of quiet reflection. The ghost light above them cast its eternal vigil, connecting them to every performer who had ever stood in that sacred space. "Tomorrow," Anthony said softly, "we're not just putting on a show. We're proving that some places have a power that transcends time, that some stories need to be told again and again, each generation adding its own voice to the chorus." Ellie held up her mother's photograph, now framed and ready to join the theater's historical display. "For everyone who ever dreamed here," she said, "past, present, and future." The ghost light pulsed once, bright and clear, as if blessing their endeavor. Tomorrow the theater would open its doors to an audience eager to experience its magic. But tonight, in these quiet moments before the storm, the company stood united under the eternal light that had watched over countless such moments. They were ready. The stage was set. The next chapter in Port Talbot Theater's ongoing story was about to begin. Opening night arrived with an electricity that seemed to crackle through Port Talbot's very air. Victoria Road had been transformed into a festival of theatrical celebration, with street performers, music, and historical displays, drawing crowds hours before the show was set to begin. Inside the theater, Anthony stood center stage in the quiet before the storm. The ghost light, which would play such a crucial role in the evening's performance, cast its familiar glow across the empty seats. In a few hours, those seats would be filled with an audience that included not just locals, but theater critics, BBC executives, and representatives from cultural preservation organizations across the UK. "Places for final checks." Ellie's voice came through the intercom, steady despite the tension evident in her tone. The company began their preparations, with the focus of seasoned performers. In the newly restored dressing rooms, Lily sat before a mirror, watching as Tori made final adjustments to her costume. A remarkable piece that would transform throughout the show, each layer revealing a different era of the theater's history. "Nervous?" Tori asked, catching Lily's reflection. "Terrified," Lily admitted, "but in a good way, like standing on the edge of something enormous." In the technical booth, Sophie ran through her complex light cues one last time. The ghost light's programming was particularly crucial. Its fluctuations would help guide the audience through different time periods, its intensity shifting to match the emotional beats of each scene. Noah and Maya rehearsed their transitions, in whispers, their contemporary characters preparing to step into the roles of James and Sarah during the pivotal 1978 sequences. The weight of playing real people, whose story had become so integral to the theater's history, showed in their focused expressions. Anthony moved through the building, checking on each element of the production. In the lobby, Grace supervised the final arrangement of historical displays, including the newly discovered photographs and letters that told the theater's personal stories. The BBC documentary crew captured everything, understanding that these moments before the performance were as much a part of the story as the show itself. At half hour to curtain, Ellie gathered the company on stage for one final moment. Together, the ghost light watched over them as she spoke. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "remember that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Every person who ever performed here, every dream that found its voice on these boards, they're all with us tonight, The audience began filing in, their murmurs of appreciation at the restored theater filling the space with anticipatory energy. Among them, Anthony noticed familiar faces. Dr. Wells with several council members, Zara positioning herself strategically for optimal viewing, and in a quiet corner, though few would recognize him, James Rothschild himself, changed by a beard and casual clothes but unmistakable to those who knew to look. As the house lights dimmed for the first time, a hush fell over the auditorium. The ghost light alone on the empty stage began to pulse with a soft, almost heartbeat-like rhythm. Lily's voice emerged from the darkness, clear and strong. Every theater has its ghosts. Not the haunting kind, but the kind that live in the walls, in the floorboards, in the very air we breathe. They're made of memories, of dreams, of stories waiting to be told. The performance began to unfold like a living tapestry. Scenes flowed seamlessly between time periods, with the ghost light serving as a constant guide, its illumination shifting and changing to mark each transition. The audience found themselves drawn into different areas of the theater, experiencing stories that spanned generations. In the transformed cafe space, they witnessed recreated moments from the 1970s, with Noah and Maya bringing James and Sarah's romance to vivid life. The technical booth became a time machine, demonstrating how theatrical innovation had evolved while maintaining the essential magic of live performance. But it was on the main stage where the most powerful moments unfolded. Lily, moving through different eras with fluid grace, became a conductor of theatrical memory. Her wheelchair, rather than limiting her performance, added a dimension of choreographic beauty that left the audience breathless. The ghost light responded to each scene, as if it were a living entity, its illumination dancing with the performers, highlighting crucial moments, casting shadows that seemed to connect past and present in tangible ways. During a particularly moving sequence, Lily addressed the audience directly. "We all have our stages," she said, her wheelchair moving in a precise pattern that echoed the blocking of historical performances. Some are made of wood and steel, some of dreams and determination. But all of them, all of us, are connected by the light that never goes out. The light that keeps watch while we find our way. In the technical booth, Sophie orchestrated the complex lighting changes with perfect timing, making the ghost light seem to respond to Lily's words with almost supernatural awareness. The effect was mesmerizing, drawing gasps from the audience, as past and present merged in waves of theatrical magic. The production's climactic moment came during the recreation of Sarah Blackwood's decision to return to Port Talbot. Maya, channeling Sarah's spirit with remarkable sensitivity, stood center stage beneath the ghost light's steady glow. "Some choices," she said, holding the actual letter Sarah had written to James, "are bigger than our dreams. Some stages call to us with voices we can't ignore." As she spoke, the ghost light began to multiply, its reflection appearing in strategically placed mirrors until the entire theater was filled with its illumination. In that moment, every era of the theater's history seemed to exist simultaneously, a convergence of theatrical time and space that left the audience spellbound. The performance's final sequence brought everything full circle. The company, spanning different time periods and styles, came together on stage. The ghost light above them began to pulse with increasing intensity, its rhythm matching the heartbeat of theatrical tradition. Lily, now at the center of the assembled company, delivered the final lines. "In every theater there's a light that never goes out. It watches, it remembers, it connects us all. And as long as that light burns, dreams will find their home here. Voices will find their strength here. And the magic of live theater will continue to transform lives, one performance at a time." The ghost light flared brilliantly, then dimmed to its eternal vigilant glow as the stage went dark. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Then, like a wave breaking, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. People were on their feet, many wiping tears from their eyes, others embracing complete strangers who had shared in this extraordinary theatrical experience. In the technical booth, Sophie finally allowed herself to breathe, her hands shaking slightly as she brought up the house lights. Grace, watching from the back of the house, noticed several critics dabbing their eyes while trying to maintain professional composure. The BBC documentary crew, who had integrated their filming seamlessly into the performance, captured the emotional response of the audience, understanding that this moment was as much a part of the story as everything that had come before. As the company took their bows, Anthony watched from the wings, feeling the unique electricity that only live theater can generate. He saw James Rothschild slip quietly toward the exit, but not before leaving something on his seat. A small package wrapped in theatrical programs from 1978. The post-show reception in Grace's cafe became a celebration not just of the performance, but of theatrical heritage itself. Critics mingled with local audience members, sharing their experiences of how the production had affected them. The BBC team conducted interviews, capturing the immediate impact of what they had witnessed. "It's unprecedented," one London critic was overheard saying. "The way they've integrated the theater's actual history with innovative storytelling techniques, it's going to change how we think about preserving theatrical heritage." The London Theatre Society representatives were already discussing plans to document the production's methodology, seeing it as a potential model for other historic theaters facing similar challenges. But perhaps the most significant moment came when Ellie discovered the package James had left behind. Inside was his original prompt book from Romeo and Juliet, containing not just his notes but Sarah's as well, their theatrical dialogue preserved in marginal conversations written 4 decades ago. With it was a note: "Some stories don't end. They just wait for the right light to illuminate them again. Thank you for helping me remember that theater isn't about the endings. It's about the eternal possibility of new beginnings." The ghost light continued its vigil above the now empty stage, its glow touching the edges of theatrical magic that still lingered in the air. The Port Talbot Theatre had done more than survive. It had reminded everyone who witnessed this performance of the transformative power of live theater. As the celebration continued into the night, Anthony found Lily sitting quietly on the stage, looking up at the ghost light. "How do you feel?" he asked, joining her in its eternal glow. "Like we've done something important," she replied. "Not just for us, or for the theater, but for everyone who ever dreamed of finding their voice on a stage somewhere." The ghost light seemed to pulse in agreement, its steady illumination a promise that this was not an ending, but rather the beginning of a new act in the ongoing story of theatrical magic. Outside, Victoria Road was still alive with festival energy, the celebration of cultural heritage continuing under the stars. Inside, the theater held its memories close, its ghost light keeping eternal watch over dreams both past and future. The Port Talbot Theatre had found its voice again, stronger than ever, ready to inspire new generations of dreamers who would find their way to its stage, guided by the light that never goes out. The following morning's newspapers carried glowing reviews, with headlines that captured the production's impact. "Port Talbot Theatre reinvents theatrical heritage," and "Ghost Light illuminates theater's future." But it was the local paper's simple headline that perhaps said it best: "Our Theater Lives." The BBC documentary team, energized by the previous night's success, began conducting follow-up interviews. They found Anthony in the auditorium, where he sat watching the ghost light's steady glow while the morning sun filtered through the restored windows. "Last night wasn't just a performance," he told them. "It was a reminder of why theater matters. In an age of digital entertainment and virtual experiences, there's still nothing that can replace the magic of live performance, of sharing space and stories with a community." The interview was interrupted by excited voices from the lobby. The Spotlight Squad had arrived early, still buzzing with energy from opening night. They carried newspapers and printouts of online reviews, but more importantly, they carried stories of how their performance had affected people personally. "My grandfather cried," Noah reported. "He said he'd forgotten what it felt like to be young and in love with theater until he saw our show," Maya added. "A woman stopped me outside. She'd been in the theater's youth program in the 1980s. Said watching us made her feel like she was home again." The ghost light seemed to brighten at their words, as if collecting these new memories. To add to its decades of theatrical witness, Zara arrived with more news. The production's success had sparked a national conversation about preserving historic theaters. Cultural preservation societies across the UK were reaching out, wanting to learn from Port Talbot's example. It's not just about saving buildings anymore, she explained, showing them the growing online discussion. People are talking about preserving theatrical heritage as a living, breathing thing. The way we integrated history with contemporary performance, it's changing how people think about cultural preservation. In Grace's cafe, now restored to its normal operation but still buzzing with opening night energy, Ellie sat with Tori and Dr. Wells, planning the theater's next steps. The production's success had opened new possibilities but also created new responsibilities. We've got inquiries from theater companies across Wales, Dr. Wells reported. They want to know how we did it. Not just the technical aspects, but how we managed to make historical theater feel so immediate and relevant. Tori, who had seen the theater through decades of ups and downs, smiled knowingly. We showed them that history isn't just something you preserve under glass. It's something you build upon, something that grows and changes with each new generation. The ghost light's steady illumination seemed to agree, its glow visible through the cafe windows, a constant reminder of theatrical continuity. Mid-morning brought another surprise. A group of theater students from Cardiff University arrived, hoping to see the space that had generated such buzz in theatrical circles. They found Lily rehearsing a new piece on stage, her wheelchair moving through the ghost light's beam with practiced grace. "Would you show us?" one student asked hesitantly. "How you integrated the wheelchair into the choreography?" Lily looked up at the ghost light, then back at the students. "It's not about integrating the chair," she said. "It's about understanding that every perceived limitation is just another way of telling the story. Here, let me demonstrate." What followed was an impromptu workshop that embodied everything the previous night's performance had celebrated. Students and performers sharing space and knowledge, the ghost light watching over another generation discovering theatrical possibilities. In the technical booth, Sophie was already working on improvements to the ghost light programming, inspired by how audiences had responded to its seemingly sentient behavior during the show. "If we adjust the timing here," she explained to a fascinated group of technical theater students, "we can make the light feel even more like a conscious presence. It's not just about illumination, it's about creating a character that's been part of every performance this theater has ever seen." The ghost light flickered appreciatively, as if acknowledging its role in the ongoing theatrical narrative. Late afternoon brought another significant visitor. James Rothschild's lawyer arrived with official documents transferring additional properties along Victoria Road to the theater's trust. The accompanying note was brief. For future expansion, some developments should preserve dreams rather than replace them. The ghost light's glow seemed to intensify as Ellie signed the papers, its illumination touching the edges of new possibilities for the theater's future. As evening approached, the company gathered for their second performance. The nervous energy of opening night had been replaced by something deeper, a confident understanding of their role in the theater's ongoing story. Anthony watched them prepare, seeing in each performer the same spark that had first drawn him to theater decades ago. The ghost light above them maintained its eternal vigil, connecting past, present, and future in its unwavering glow. "Places, everyone," Ellie's voice came through the intercom, strong and sure. The company took their positions, ready to once again weave their magic through time and space. The ghost light pulsed once, a theatrical heartbeat calling them to action. In the moment before the performance began, Anthony looked out at the packed house. Another full audience, eager to experience the theater's renaissance. He saw in their faces the same hunger for authentic connection that had always drawn people to live theater. The ghost light dimmed slightly, preparing for its crucial role in the evening's performance. Below it, Lily took her position, ready to once again guide audiences through the theater's living history. This was more than just a successful show now. It was proof that theatrical heritage could be both preserved and renewed, that tradition could dance with innovation under the eternal watch of a light that never goes out. The house lights dimmed and the ghost light began its familiar pulse. Another performance was about to begin, adding new memories to the theatrical tapestry that had been woven on this stage for generations. The Port Talbot Theatre had not just survived, it had shown the world how to keep theatrical heritage alive and relevant. Under the ghost light's eternal watch, it would continue to inspire, transform, and illuminate dreams for generations to come. 1 year later, the Port Talbot Theatre celebrated its anniversary of rebirth with a special performance. The ghost light, which had never stopped its vigilant watch, illuminated a stage that had become a symbol of theatrical renaissance across the United Kingdom. Anthony sat in the last row of the auditorium, watching the final dress rehearsal for the anniversary show. The Spotlight Squad, now expanded to include performers from across Wales, had created something entirely new, a piece that celebrated not just their theatre's salvation, but the preservation of theatrical heritage everywhere. "It's remarkable," Ellie said, joining him with a thick folder of papers. "Do you know we've hosted 38 different theater companies this year? Everyone wants to perform here now, to be part of what we've created." The folder she carried contained evidence of the theater's impact. News clippings documented how their model of preservation had inspired similar projects across the country. The BBC documentary, Ghost Light: The Port Talbot Theatre Story, had won several awards and sparked a national conversation about cultural heritage. On stage, Lily directed a complex sequence involving performers of all ages and abilities. Her wheelchair moved with confident precision as she demonstrated exactly what she wanted from each scene. In the year since their breakthrough performance, she had developed into a promising director, her unique perspective bringing fresh insights to classical works. Cambridge offered her a place in their theater program, Ellie mentioned proudly. First wheelchair user they've accepted into the directing course. She insisted on deferring for a year, though, wants to finish developing our youth theater program first. The ghost light pulsed gently, as if approving of this continuation of theatrical tradition. Under its eternal watch, the theater had become more than just a preserved building. It was now a living laboratory of theatrical innovation. Sophie, who had received multiple job offers from West End theaters, had chosen to stay in Port Talbot. Her groundbreaking work with the Ghost Lights programming had evolved into a new system for integrating historical theatrical techniques with modern technology. Theater companies from across Europe now consulted her on how to maintain theatrical tradition while embracing technological advancement. "Watch this," she called from the booth, demonstrating her latest innovation. The Ghost Lights illumination split into multiple beams, each following a different performer, creating a dance of light that connected various parts of the stage in an intricate choreography. The technical achievement was impressive, but more remarkable was how it served the storytelling. The light seemed to have a consciousness of its own, responding to the performer's emotions, enhancing the theatrical experience without overshadowing it. Grace's Cafe had evolved as well, becoming a crucial part of the theater's expanded mission. Its walls now featured a rotating gallery of theatrical photographs and memorabilia, and its tables were often filled with theater practitioners, sharing ideas and developing new projects. "We're not just preserving history anymore," Grace observed, bringing coffee to where Anthony sat. "We're making it." The anniversary production would showcase everything they had learned over the past year. It incorporated elements from their breakthrough show, but expanded the concept to include stories from other theaters facing similar challenges. The Ghost Lights role had grown too. It now served as a symbol of theatrical continuity across all performing spaces. During a break in rehearsal, Anthony noticed Noah and Maya working with a group of young performers in the corner. The two original Spotlight Squad members had developed into talented teaching artists, passing on their understanding of theatrical tradition to the next generation. "Remember," Noah was saying, "it's not about pretending to be someone else. It's about finding the truth in every moment, just like Sir Anthony taught us." The ghost light seemed to brighten at these words, its glow touching the eager faces of the young performers as they absorbed this theatrical wisdom. Zara, who had parlayed her coverage of the theater's transformation into a successful career, focusing on cultural preservation, arrived with more good news. The Sarah Blackwood Foundation, established by James Rothschild, had expanded its mission. It now supported not just theater preservation, but also innovative programs for making theater accessible to all communities. Speaking of James, Zara added, lowering her voice, "Have you seen what he's doing in London?" She showed them photographs of a new project. Rothschild Development was renovating historic theaters across the city, but with a crucial difference. Instead of modernizing them beyond recognition, the company was preserving their historical character while updating their capabilities. "He's using our Ghostlight programming in all of them," Sophie noted proudly. "Says every theater needs its own eternal guardian." The impact of Port Talbot's theatrical renaissance had rippled out in unexpected ways. Dr. Wells, now heading a national commission on cultural preservation, reported that applications for theater programs across the UK had increased significantly. Young people were rediscovering the magic of live performance, inspired by the story of a small Welsh theater that had shown how tradition and innovation could dance together under a Ghostlight's watch. As the anniversary show took shape during final rehearsals, its meaning became clear. This wasn't just a celebration of one theater's survival. It was a testament to the enduring power of live performance to transform lives and communities. Lily had structured the production around the concept of theatrical legacy. Each scene showed how theatrical traditions passed from one generation to the next, how each new group of performers added their own voice to an eternal conversation. The Ghostlight played a central role, its illumination guiding audiences through time and space, showing how every performance, every theatrical moment, connected to all others through the simple tradition of keeping a light burning on an empty stage. During the technical run-through, Anthony found himself back center stage, standing in the Ghostlight's glow. He remembered that first visit a year ago, when he discovered the theater in crisis. Now, looking out at the restored auditorium, he saw something he'd always known, but had perhaps forgotten. Theaters were more than just buildings. They were keepers of dreams, guardians of possibilities. The anniversary performance opened to another full house. The audience included theater practitioners from across the country, cultural preservation experts, and most importantly, community members who had supported the theater through its transformation. As the Ghostlight began its now famous opening pulse, Anthony noticed something remarkable. In the front row sat an elderly couple he recognized from photographs, Malcolm and Margaret Davies, the original theater caretakers who had maintained the Ghostlight's vigil for decades before the current Renaissance. The performance unfolded, like a theatrical tapestry, weaving together stories of preservation and innovation, tradition and transformation. The Ghostlight danced above it all, its illumination a reminder of theatrical continuity through all changes. In the final moment, as Lily delivered the closing lines beneath the Ghostlight's eternal glow, the meaning of their year-long journey became clear. They hadn't just saved a theater. They had shown how theatrical heritage could remain vibrantly alive, how tradition could evolve without being lost. The Ghostlight dimmed to its steady, vigilant beam as the performance ended, ready to keep its eternal watch over whatever theatrical magic would unfold next on the Port Talbot stage. After the standing ovation, after the celebrations and congratulations, Anthony found himself alone in the theater once more. The Ghostlight cast its familiar glow across the empty stage just as it had done for generations. "We did it, old friend," he said softly to the light. "We showed them that some traditions never die. They just wait for the right moment to shine again." The Ghostlight pulsed once as if in agreement, its eternal vigil continuing as it had for decades, as it would for generations to come. In its steady glow, the Port Talbot Theatre stood ready for its next act, its next transformation, its next moment of theatrical magic. For under a Ghostlight's watch, every ending is just another beginning. Every final bow just an intermission before the next performance begins. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.